Hello, welcome to TBR Spin, March pick and February book review. So in a minute I'll be telling you how I got on with Ex-Libris by Ross King. But first, let's pick our book for the next month. So the prompt this month was to find your longest book and swap that out for something else. So the longest book on my list was Reprieve by James Matheson at just over 400 pages. So that one's been swapped out. And I decided to bring in this one that's called Distortion by Gautam Malkani, which I have never heard anybody talking about. So that's kind of a lot of the reason why I pick up books, is when I don't think anyone's talking about them. This is an Unbound publication, Unbound being like, they're almost like a crowdsourcing platform, except if you send them a book, they still have to accept your book, and they need to accept your text. Like, they have to accept it as something they want to publish, and then they crowdsource. So Jackie Morris, one of my favourite illustrators and authors, also uses Unbound to publish her books. So this one is a guy who has 3 different identities. So these 3 identities of the same young man have been growing dangerously more hardcore and hardwired, both online and off, thanks to the self-reinforcing effects of social media and search engines and the uncanny predictive capabilities of his smartphones. When 2 creepy old dudes threaten to expose Dylan, he is forced to unravel a gut-wrenching mystery that he would rather leave well alone. Set in a strange greyscape between the digital world and the messy realm of the body, Distortion asks timely questions about what happens to our sense of self when our digital data and search histories are crunched up, processed, and fed back to us. How can we navigate the tension between emotional truth and factual accuracy? What can we do to neutralise our own toxicity? And what happens in the world of flesh and blood when the roles of parent and child become tragically reversed? So this one's going onto my TBR Spin stack, but it's not the book that I'm going to be reading this month, because it then said, the next spin of the TBR wheel said to pick one with your favourite cover. So this is not my favourite cover, no. So I was torn between these two, These Dividing Walls by Fran Cooper and the Tenth Muse by Catherine Chung. Ultimately, this feels like a summer read. It's all about the sweltering heat of Paris in the summer. So I have decided to go for the Tenth Muse by Catherine Chung. This one, from childhood, Catherine knows she is different and that her parents are not who they seem to be. But as she grows up and becomes a mathematician, she faces the most human of problems. Who is she, and what is the cost of love? What is the cost of ambition? On her quest to conquer the Riemann hypothesis, the greatest unsolved mathematical problem of her time, she turns to a theorem with a mysterious history that holds both the lock and key to her identity and to secrets long buried during World War II. Forced to confront some of the biggest events of the 20th century and rethink everything she knows of herself, Catherine strives to take her place in the world of higher mathematics, reclaiming the voices of the women who came before her, whose love of the language of numbers connects them across generations. So yeah, quite excited about that one. Again, not heard anyone talking about this. I don't know anyone's opinion, so we'll see. So now time to talk about Ex-Libris by Ross King. Now, when I was reading the description, I don't know whether I did, but my gut instinct was to compare it to Dan Brown and this idea of the historical thriller. And that is wrong. That is not what this is. This has a very niche audience, I would say, and that is why this came up on my lowest rated books from this list. Why it gets so many bad reviews, and it's because I think it has such a niche audience. This is a historical novel with a mystery, but it's not a thriller. So mystery without the thrills. Ross King is a non-fiction author primarily. So he knows his stuff. Like, this is his time period. This is what he writes about. This is how I heard of him, was him writing non-fiction about this time period that this historical novel is set in. He clearly knows a lot about books and the book trade and all those sorts of things that are tied into this point in history. And so this is full of facts about books from then. And I think sometimes that overwhelms the narrative, and you can get whole paragraphs that just don't seem to make any sense. So it's so steeped in fact that often the story behind it gets a bit lost, it gets a bit muddied. And this is someone who is interested in these things. I'm interested in this, in the time period he's talking about. I'm interested in the way in which knowledge was valued and the way in which books were valued at the time. And a lot of this, it refers to this idea that many rulers at the time would destroy books. Like throughout history, people have destroyed books because they want their knowledge to be ultimate, like knowledge is power. And so that theme is woven throughout it, but I just think the story itself gets lost in the facts that he's putting forward. Now, I have read other historical novels that are designed to be accurate, like whilst they're a fictional story, they're designed to be accurate, and unfortunately often they do become a bit boring as they get bogged down in real details. Some of the stuff that I think you should, to make a good narrative, to make a good story, you should just skip over it, and unfortunately that's what this suffers with. I was going to plough on, but as I said, I'm trying to be a bit more ballsy with my DNFs. I got to just over 30% through this book and I was just so bored. And this is the problem, is once you get a bit bogged down in a book that you're bored with, it then puts you off reading other books. So I decided to DNF this. I'm going to give it to my dad to try because this is a genre that we both enjoy, this like historical mystery genre. It's where our reading tastes overlap. So I'm going to give it to him to try and see how he gets on with it. But yeah, unfortunately I was just really, really bored with it. So there we go. So next month, you'll have my review of The Tenth Muse by Catherine Chung. See you then.